very little of what I learned as an engine engineer is transferable to electric drive systems. A transmission is really complicated, lots of bits and pieces. The gearbox that you have in an electric car is very, very, very simple. So what do you do with some of the folks where their knowledge is not relevant anymore? How are you working with that? Do you do retraining, or is it so long, have a nice day, or what are you guys doing?
In this video, an extremely telling and insightful discussion between Sandy Munro and the CEO of Polestar, who, believe it or not, are one of the world's leading electric vehicle manufacturers in terms of units sold. You may even describe them as one of Tesla's closer so-called competitors, but that would be a bit of a stretch, as we'll find out. I highly encourage everyone, especially those who own Tesla stock, to watch this video in full. Of course, if you want to see the full interview, there's a link in the description. It's one of the first episodes of the new Munro Live podcast. But I just want to focus in on the distinctions between Tesla versus Polestar, the different approaches, strategies, how vertically integrated or not, their goals or lack thereof, and their overall mindset. More on the subject of Sandy Munro, I posted an exclusive Twitter subscribers only video featuring some clips from Sandy Munro, who discloses how much money he made in his first year of business. And I also share some thoughts around business, fulfillment, and growth. If you're not already subscribed on Twitter, you can do so by heading to my profile at Stephen Mark Ryan. I'm posting early access to my daily YouTube videos there at the moment, plus also posting exclusive content like the video I just mentioned. And if that's not enough exclusive content, I'm still producing plenty of exclusive content over on Patreon as well. I am a very busy boy.
Very little of what I learned as an engine engineer is transferable to electric drive systems. A transmission is really complicated, lots of bits and pieces. The gearbox that you have in an electric car is very, very, very simple. So what do you do with some of the folks where their knowledge is not relevant anymore? How are you working with that? Do you do retraining, or is it so long, have a nice day, or what are you guys doing?
And thus begins the dance between Polestar's CEO honestly answering questions and also being a CEO. Sandy Munro, in essence, has just said, I used to work on engines. I was an engine engineer. And I know that an engine engineer today doesn't know shit about an electric vehicle. And just some important context before I continue with this rant. For those who don't know, Volvo, which is owned by a Chinese company Geely, that kept the Volvo brand, Polestar is a subsidiary of these two mother companies. Volvo still making internal combustion engine vehicles, but Polestar itself is all electric, yet they have partnerships so they can utilize and leverage some of Volvo's technology. So some of these comments won't directly apply to Polestar themselves, but will to Volvo, meaning the Polestar CEO is going to have an awkward dance around, I don't really want to say they're all completely fucking useless because Volvo might get butthurt, so he'll have to handle this question rather delicately. What are you going to do? You're going to shit can them all because they can't do shit? They don't know what they're doing? It doesn't translate, despite what many of the clowns saying the competition's coming seem to think. What are you going to do? Try and retrain these people that don't know anything about, maybe just hope they can somehow miraculously be excellent as well? And go through the whole retraining process? I really do feel for Polestar's here. Sandy himself, throughout this interview, it's quite a dance between not wanting to cause him to have to say things that are too brutal, but at the same time, also wanting to ask the questions in the nicest possible way. But here are the facts before we hear the response. As I've said a million times from day one on this channel, the majority of engineers working at legacy automotive companies have skills that are applicable to producing internal combustion engine vehicles and the things that go in them, such as the internal combustion engine. They may be a great engine engineer, but that does not translate. Of course, the most elite engineers in the world with huge brains, sure, they could figure anything out. The problem is, they ain't working at Polestar or any legacy automotive companies. The best of the best are working for Elon at SpaceX or Tesla, and then many of the B and C players at aerospace companies. So, I just want to encourage everybody watching to pay very close attention to how delicately the Polestar CEO tries to answer Sandy's questions. He isn't going to come right out and say, yeah, you know what, these engineers are going to be fucking useless, they should be fired, etc. Not going to happen.
I mean, the great thing about human mankind is the capability of actually switching and learning.
Yes.
I mean, curiosity and just using, I mean, the brain is still valid. I mean, the brain that you use to do, and the creativity, certain ways of innovation, thinking. So just simply dedicate your life now to the new thing. It was, and funnily enough, that is what actually keeps people on their toes and maybe even gets them out of a rather dull place after having done for 20 years the same thing to actually get onto the new stuff. That's amazing. It takes a little while, but surprisingly a much shorter time that you would expect that they get fully fire onto the new thing. Now that I think is absolutely possible.
Hypothetically speaking, just imagine your girlfriend. I know you don't have one, but just hypothetically speaking, imagine your girlfriend keeps flipping her phone over every time a new message comes in. You get a little bit, what the fuck's going on here? She's hanging out after work with her male co-workers, heading out to work-only events, dressed to the nines with her male co-workers. And you say, honey, are you still faithful? You haven't been cheating on me, have you? You're still faithful, right? And she says, I think it is absolutely possible that I have been faithful to you. I rest my case.
It's just really, like I said before, it needs that very clear direction. Say, look, this is what we concentrate now on.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing for me is I'm looking at there's much less in the way of complication from a mechanical standpoint and a tremendous amount of extra complications when you start looking at the electronics and whatnot.
That was where I would have been gone now, because that indeed is a new thing. Funnily enough, even ICE train cars, electronic-wise, got already into such a Hercules task. But now that is really the field where car industry definitely has to transform into something much more software-oriented. That's certainly where, when we talked about before about electric engines and stuff, in a way that's still, despite the fact that it's a new field, it's still a technology which is somehow in the scope of what automotive engineers are kind of used to do. But software and really software engineering and that thinking, that of course is a complete different world.
Yeah. Well, that's, we found out, or actually some of our customers have found out the hard way that not every software engineer is adaptable to the type of software that a car or an airplane is capable of needing. Not capable, but absolutely needs.
Despite claims to the contrary from walking manifestations of the Dunning-Kruger effect, Tesla is not just a car company. They are in fact a software company who happens to make hardware, known as cars and battery storage. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of engineering, a lot of stuff goes into their vehicles, but at their core, Tesla really is a software company. And I hate to say this, but these are unfortunately the facts. There are levels to software engineering, like there are levels to everything, but in particular, software engineering. An elite software engineer, I'm talking top 1%, can do things that a bottom 99% software engineer simply cannot do. Although, it won't be long before language-based AIs may level the playing field a little bit. Legacy automotive companies are trying to cobble together their software teams now at great expense, and they're finding a slight problem. They're hiring the scraps and the leftovers. Because what software engineer in their right mind would want to work at a company like Ford or General Motors or Volkswagen, when instead they could be working in Silicon Valley at a tech startup, at a unicorn, a company like Tesla? The kind of engineers you have working at companies in Silicon Valley, tech companies, are not the same kind of engineers you'll find working for a local bank or a legacy automotive manufacturer. There's a very, very high skill level necessary to develop the software, to operate, to thermally manage, and to optimize electric vehicles. As I've said in the past, there's no magic catch up to Tesla button. One of the biggest challenges legacy automotive manufacturers face isn't putting the vehicles themselves together and doing so profitably, although, believe me, that's not an easy task either. It's figuring out the software. It was 2012 when Tesla first began doing over-the-air software updates. It was literally a decade before a single other automotive manufacturer on the planet attempted their first over-the-air software update, and still today most haven't figured it out. Of course, if it were easy, if it was simple, then of course, as soon as Tesla started doing over-the-air updates, they all would have thought, good idea, let's do it ourselves, bang, let's start. Took a decade before anyone other than Tesla, even attempted an over-the-air software update. People just are not understanding this. Electric vehicles are computers on wheels. They look similar to an internal combustion engine vehicle on the outside, but that's where the similarities end. And again, what elite top 0.1% software engineer is going to go work for a dinosaur, aka a legacy automotive company? Can you imagine putting that on your resume? Software engineer at Volkswagen. Probably doesn't quite have the same pull as software engineer at Tesla or SpaceX or OpenAI. I could keep going on.
So there's a big sieve of sifting, trying to get the right people to do the right things. It's a transitional area that I think is going to be painful for some, and for others, I think they're just going to dive in and they'll have no problems with it. But what do you see as the future? Like we've talked about when we walked around. I said that Tesla has gone from wound electric motors now to hairpin motors. Excellent idea. But then we started tearing apart the Lucid electric motor, and the Lucid gearbox is like nothing I've ever seen ever for the type of power and whatever. This is just like mind-blowing, the difference.
Big rap from Sandy on Lucid's electric motor. Of course, you would hope and expect that given the purchase price of a Lucid Air, their engineers are working with a much bigger budget. Lucid should have the best everything in their vehicles. There's nothing else around that price point scaling up production. Something I've discussed previously on this channel. Given the fact that Lucid's Air isn't a mass market vehicle, they're not aiming to sell hundreds of thousands, then millions of these things per year. They have the luxury, pun intended, of designing and engineering stuff with much more expensive, lightweight, more efficient components. They're not thinking, how do we drive the cost of this down and get great performance? They're thinking, how do we absolutely max out performance? Who gives a fuck about the cost? We're selling our vehicles for $150,000, $160,000 a pop. Very much looking forward to seeing what Lucid have pulled off here. And of course, great engineering is one element, but profitably scaling up production is the hard part. Something Lucid are unfortunately learning the very hard and potentially financially catastrophic way.
What do you think is beyond that? Where do you think we're going to be going in the distant future? Not just next week or next month, but maybe by the time we get to 2030, where do you think we're going to be looking at as far as the percentage of electric vehicles? What new techniques are sitting out there? Where do you see the future going?
Well, certain elements will be very much dictated by maturing this new technology. Getting rid of the permanent magnets in the electric engines definitely is a big task ahead, but doable, very beneficial. And then, clearly, Sandy, the big mega challenge will be each and every engineering point taking into consideration reducing CO2 footprint, getting the burden that there is with CO2 in any produced piece out of the car. We were having a walk and we looked at, showed me the electric battery tray. My immediate question would have been, okay, might have advantages towards the aluminum case, but the aluminum case, I know I can recycle 100%, no problem to have that in a circular process. How about this plastic? That is where we do a lot of research and work a lot with, of course, partners, suppliers, companies that are on that journey. It is one of the biggest engineering tasks for the next 10 years, how to get the CO2 footprint out of our products.
Yeah. So, were you listening? CEO of Polestar, who, believe it or not, are selling quite a few electric vehicles compared to most other companies on the planet. One of the earlier movers, besides the obvious examples of Tesla. Their CEO has just disclosed that, essentially, their biggest engineering priority over the next decade is not making their vehicles better, safer, faster, cooler. It isn't nailing software. It isn't driving their costs down. It's essentially reducing our carbon footprint. which will get them some brownie points. But just think about this for a moment. One of the most advanced manufacturers of electric vehicles on Earth, Polestar, literally, they're selling tens upon tens of thousands of vehicles, which is more than most other companies outside of China and beside Tesla, are focusing their engineering talents not on making their vehicles better and or cheaper, but instead making them greener. They've literally given up. They're not even going to attempt to compete with Tesla, and good on them. They may as well have this space to themselves. But do you understand the implications here? Tesla's engineers are maniacally focused on making their products cheaper and better. That's their focus, literally. Sole focus, cheaper and better, cheaper and better, cheaper and better. That's how they ultimately will sell tens of millions per year. It appears that this particular competition certainly isn't coming for Tesla.
And you've done a fine job. I heard that, I read that your green footprint, or your footprint, is getting a lot greener than everybody else because you've looked at the beginning of the program or at the beginning of the cycle, which ones of these materials or these processes give us the best results with the lowest carbon footprint, not on the vehicle itself, not the emissions that come out of the tailpipe or anything, but how much in the way of emissions, and I can't remember how many tons it was that you reduced.
It's what we call the life cycle assessment, a yearly checkup. Where are we with any kind of our production? The Polestar 2, of course, was the first one where we had a full report. And it was 27 tons the first year. That is more than a combustion engine car, yes, but the analysis shows as well, if you then have a use case of, 15,000 kilometers per year, after 2.5 years, you're actually in a better position than the ICE train car. And of course, we want to reduce that burden as close as possible to zero, which is, of course, super difficult. And some of the steps are actually easy. You just simply, where you produce today with, call it now, fossil energy, if you go and have natural water power, hydrogen power, whatever, to produce your batteries, boom, 24% less CO2 burden of the Polestar 3 battery compared to the Polestar 2 battery, just by changing the energy source.
Right.
Many other things become more cumbersome and difficult. But sometimes it's just asking the right question. We very often come to our partners and just asking, hey, how much could we actually, in that new piece, enhance the amount of recycled plastic before it gets difficult in its attributes?
So, to contrast, Tesla goes to their suppliers, those they haven't completely made redundant and unnecessary by vertically integrating whatever the supplier was doing, and says, hey motherfuckers, can you make this shit faster, better, cheaper? Because if you don't, we'll do it ourselves. Here's the specs we'd like. Please do this, or we will do it ourselves. Meanwhile, Polestar are going to their suppliers, instead of wanting cheaper, better, no, they want greener. Polestar are not and will never be Tesla's competition. And some very interesting comments just around the corner, so stick with me.
Sometimes you get, oh, you're the first one who's asking that. And I cannot believe it that still is not almost a standard in what you go out as an RFQ to suppliers, that you of course ask for that element. So there are some low-hanging fruits that can already do a big benefit. And we would already benefit if the industry would align on a standard of measuring, which still doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that you have a very clear definition of how we all would report on the CO2 footprint of your product.
We really need to talk about this. Now, I'm not trying to be a dick to Polestar or their CEO. I'm just trying to illustrate the stark contrast between the mindset of a company like Tesla versus Polestar. Polestar, wouldn't it be great if somebody spoon-fed us the numbers we need to match and the standard things so we can figure out how to get the numbers good so everyone knows we're green? Meanwhile, Tesla just uses their brain and thinks, okay, how can we make our vehicles better for the environment? Remember the whole impact report that just dropped from Tesla? Let me refresh your memory. So here we are looking at Tesla's 2022 impact report. I'm going to power through this at lightning speed. I just want to illustrate the point. While Polestar's CEO is going, it'd be great if there was some standard definitions so we know exactly how to remove carbon and do this and do that, blah, blah, blah. Just some industry standards, which I understand his perspective. They want to know what boxes to tick and how do they get a certain rating here and this, that, and the other. In contrast, Tesla themselves are proactively just doing whatever they can. Hence the whole impact report. This thing is a couple of 100 pages long. Tesla talks about everything, including Master Plan Part 3. But more importantly, their environmental impact. Check this out, okay? Tesla's done the numbers. They're not sitting around waiting for somebody to tell them, okay, how do we get a good score on this or that? They're literally doing the numbers themselves. They're talking about their impact, how much CO2 is emitted from their vehicles, the lifetime change. All this kind of stuff is in Tesla's own impact report. They're doing the work here. This is called proactivity. Tesla doesn't care about ticking a box or getting, oh yeah, ESG approved, yeah. No, instead, Tesla's like, we're just going to make our products as good as we can. We're going to do whatever we can to reduce our carbon footprint. We don't need somebody to tell us how to do this or what metrics to focus on. We're just going to do what we can across the board, everywhere, to make sure that we're having a massive impact. This again just shows the difference in mindset between these two companies. Now, like I said, this is a multi-100 page report. We're not going to run through every single page. This video will be 400 years long. But again, this is the difference between Tesla versus the so-called competition. Polestar CEO looking for some industry standards on emissions, how green our vehicles are, how do we measure this, how do we track this, how do we improve this, what do we need to make better? Meanwhile, Tesla's out here actually doing the work in the real world without somebody having told them what they need to do. Very important to understand. These two companies are not alike at all. For example, do you think Polestar are using AI to increase the energy efficiency of their factories? Probably not. Tesla certainly are. Tesla reducing their water usage, which itself has an impact. Tesla's water use per cubic meter per vehicle, industry leading at Berlin, once fully ramped. Giga Texas up there as well. I could keep going on and on. You guys understand the point, right? The mindset, the difference between these two companies could not be starker. I'm not here to rip on Polestar, just calling a spade a spade. This would be the perfect time to talk about Tesla safety. In case you guys don't know, the vehicle crash test safety around the world is fairly standardized. You've got side impact, front impact. There's very clear places where you'll be tested. How does your vehicle handle a collision at this velocity from this direction? You can game the system. You can literally engineer your vehicles to score high on safety tests. Not in the real world, in real collisions, but in safety tests, which is supposed to represent typical collisions. However, unlike other companies, Tesla doesn't try to game these safety tests. Instead, they literally utilize their fleet data to see where impacts are actually occurring in their vehicles in the real world and engineer their vehicles to be as safe as possible under all of these circumstances, not just to game the safety tests. This means Tesla's vehicles in the real world are much safer than anything else. We've seen the data. The lowest probability of injury in any vehicles ever tested. The top 4 are all Tesla vehicles. It's a perfect analogy for what we've just heard about making your vehicles greener and better for the environment and less CO2 emissions. Polestar, seeking input. Hey, how do we tick the boxes? How do we do what you need us to do? It's the same as gaming a safety test. Okay, well, how do we make sure that the front and the rear... Instead, Tesla's like, okay, that, let's just try to make our vehicles as safe as possible in the real world based on actual real world collision data. In doing so, Tesla also scores extremely high on the safety testing, but more important than that, this is all hypothetical. Who cares about the crash dummies? How about the real world? That's where Tesla safety really has the biggest impact. See what I did there? That's pretty bad.
Well, that that is tough because you're now talking about governments, and I've never heard of any governments that ever aligned with anything. In fact, even departments in the same government can't seem to get their...
It's one of the big frustrating things, as well a big cost driver. If you see how all the legislation and rules are so scattered around the world, it's a disaster.
I can't even imagine what homologation is going to look like in the not-so-distant future. And other people that I've talked to, they're scared to death that some fool who... And actually, many of the people that I've talked to in these different agencies and whatnot have really no clue. They've never worked in a car plant. They've never designed anything in their life. They have an uncle who happens to be a congressman or something. I don't know how this all happens, but it certainly doesn't come from industry. It used to, but it doesn't anymore. But one of the things that I was wondering about that I've been pushing for actually since I was at Ford is going from 12 volt to 48 volt. And Tesla's made that announcement. That will definitely reduce the weight, which is the main factor when you're looking at range. It also should reduce the amount of complexity, because if everything is at 48 or 240, I mean, things go a lot easier. Everything seems to work out a whole lot better if we can do that. Have you guys looked at that at all? Going to 48 volts.
So, just want to talk about this. I feel bad for the Polestar CEO. It's very awkward when Sandy Munro's asking questions where he kind of knows the answer, but he can't really say exactly what he's thinking because, well, let's just get to my tweet. When Tesla announced that they were moving to a 48-volt architecture at Investor Day 2023, they essentially told the entire automotive industry, you guys are going to need to copy this or you're fucked. Per my tweet, Tesla basically said copy or perish. And Elon responded to this. A lot of people are unaware, but the bus voltage raised from 12 to 48 volt drops copper usage by around 4 times. This means a shitload of weight out of the vehicle. Less weight equals more range on the same size battery. There's lots of other benefits as well. Won't get into all those super nerdy engineering stuff. Most of you will fall asleep. Sorry to the few engineering autists who are barring up at the very thought. But the point here, Tesla is now dictating terms in the automotive industry, hence copy or perish. Anyone could have done this, but it took Tesla to do this, and we'll understand why in just a moment. But I thought I'd add this very important context. Sandy Munro is basically low-key saying, so Tesla just announced the whole 48-volt thing, and Sandy knows that if everyone doesn't copy, they're fucked. So now he's asking Polestar delicately, so have you guys thought about maybe moving to 48-volt as well? Because if you don't, you're fucked. But he won't say that out loud. At least, in my opinion. I don't know what's in Sandy's head, of course. Pure speculation.
Yeah, and it's... the benefits of it, of course, are on your end. It's just that if you're stuck in one system, and for years all the industry has developed components in it to switch it now. It's just sometimes it needs just that initiative, and boom, then it happens. So maybe that will be the tipping point where indeed it will now happen that we switch all to 48. Yeah.
Man, that was awkward. The poor guy. I mean, he's being honest here. It's delicate, but it's like, well, we're kind of stuck. We're not out here inventing and innovating, and we're just following. And, you know, most of our suppliers don't do 48 volt and don't want to do 48 volt, and we don't want to do it now. We kind of, it's good that Tesla's, maybe now that Tesla's doing this, maybe they'll force the whole industry and all the suppliers to switch to 48 volt. Spoiler alert, they will. And then eventually we'll be able to adopt that technology as well. Not because we knew it was a good idea and we did it ourselves, but because we're following the leader. This is literally the story of Tesla's life as a company. They're dictating terms, whether it's pricing, whether it's technology. Like literally, they forced the entire automotive industry to transition to electric, but they ain't done that. Right now, you've got the chicken and egg scenario. Everyone's been doing things the way they've been doing them. Total lack of innovation. This includes suppliers and automotive manufacturers themselves. And they're just sitting knowing it'd be a much better idea to move to 48 volt, but it's going to be hard, so let's not even do it. And again, I'm not being hard on Polestar. What else are you going to do? It's not in their best interest to take the risk. Same with Volvo, actually. It just goes to show Tesla's leading the way. They're showing all these bitches how to get shit done. As I said in my tweet, copy or perish.
Well, I can tell you that in talking to suppliers, it's funny, but they said, "Oh yeah, we've had 48 volt. We've got them here, but nobody wants to buy them." Oh. And they kind of like, so it's kind of like OEMs point this way, and and tier twos point in the other direction. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering how much capability there might be out there, because Tesla has announced that they're probably going to make most of their sensors and some of their connectors internally. They're just going to do it themselves. They're about as vertically integrated as you can get, apart from Henry Ford growing his own rubber trees and things. But apart from that, where do you think Volvo is going to be as far as vertical integration is concerned?
It's a little bit the question of what you're aiming at, and Tesla is of course on a journey where they're gonna, aim for 10 million cars per year, competing with Volkswagen, Toyota. Of course, that's a complete different mindset where vertical integration has a different purpose and meaning than if you're a car maker who is in a premium luxury segment, limited in terms of how much you actually want to produce. It really has to be a very clever game.
Some very interesting and candid insights, again, from the Polestar CEO. He's pointing out that if Tesla are aiming to sell 10 plus million vehicles per year, which they are, it's a totally different mindset. If, however, you're like Polestar and you see yourselves as a premium automotive manufacturer, you're intentionally limiting your volumes. Instead of growing as fast as possible, selling as many vehicles as possible and driving the cost down as much as possible, etc., you're thinking, well, we're just going to sell to people, premium segment, maybe a few 100,000 if we're lucky, maybe approaching 500,000, maybe closer to 750,000 vehicles per year, maybe if we're lucky in a decade. Totally different mindset. And again, more evidence that Tesla has no competition. If you ain't aiming for 20 million vehicles a year at the end of the decade, you're not going to take the necessary steps to achieve that goal. Obviously. Whether or not Tesla achieves the goal on time, that's not the point. The point is they have a different mindset and a different approach, and the Polestar CEO recognizes this. How does a company attempt to compete with Tesla in the mass market? The answer is they don't. Like Polestar, they're not even going to try, and this is actually the play. I've said Tesla's already won the decade. Don't even bother. The only way to sell electric vehicles at the end of this decade, in my opinion, other than being reliant upon a little bit of brand loyalty from insane people that'll pay more for a worse product just because it's got a certain brand on it, is to compete in the absolute top of the market, the high-end, luxury, premium, etc., like Polestar, like Lucid Motors, assuming they don't go bankrupt, or compete in the absolute arse end of the market. And I don't mean affordable economic mass market. No. I mean bottom arse end of the market. Vehicles that cost approximately all and have zero safety features, which are totally fine, unless of course somebody farts in your general direction, in which case you'll probably break multiple bones. Tesla will never make unsafe vehicles. They're not going to be competing in the arse end of the market. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm sure, who'll sell a bunch of three-wheeler electric vehicles with zero safety features and kill a lot of people in collisions as a result. And I ain't judging, someone's got to do it. But Tesla's not going anywhere near that shit. These are the only parts of the market anyone has a hope of competing in. The absolute arse end where it's cost prohibitive to put enough safety stuff in your vehicle to actually make safe vehicles, therefore they're not safe. But they're cheap, at least they're cheap. Not safe, but they're cheap. Or the absolute high end. No other company on the planet right now is aiming to achieve the kind of volumes of electric vehicles that Tesla is. So no one's implementing the necessary strategy to get there. Again, Tesla has won the decade. I'm telling you now.
Making sure that the exclusivity kind of maintains. And there, I think you have to accept and acknowledge that you have to work very wisely with certain things that you do yourself because it matters for your brand and there is a big gain. And on other things, you just simply have to work together with partners. For example, in the case of Polestar, we very clearly would never ever go and develop our own safety system, our own autopiloting system. This is where we, of course, harvest what is the big knowledge within the Volvo company and get safety, ADAS systems, autopiloting, the LiDAR that we introduced now in the Polestar 3. All of this is, of course, based on software and knowledge that is in the Volvo group. That's scales, of course, to a bigger thing. Would we go into battery production ourselves? No, most certainly not. Of course, this is where we would very much work together with a company like Northvolt, which is now happening in the north of Europe, very close to us. That's, of course, where you search for the partners that you do it together with. So it's a slight different approach, I have to admit.
Exactly. Polestar never going to consider making their own batteries, whereas Tesla is literally making their own batteries, the 4680 cells. You know, the ones that embarrassed the battery industry when they were unveiled. Why didn't the battery industry think of this? Kind of embarrassing that a car company, just a car company, invented a better form factor for lithium-ion batteries, has now given the plans, the designs to actual battery companies. Hey guys, make this form factor as well. We'll make them ourselves, but we also want some from you because we need a lot of batteries. So please, here's how to make the cells we've designed. Thank you. Different goals, different approach.
Well, some of the things I know we were talking about, the seats we're in are basically seats out of a Tesla, and now your seats are you're making your own, correct? You have your own cushions.
It's so relevant for what the customer feels and thinks about. The seats are so important, and indeed, there's a very, very good heritage, very good knowledge. The engineer who has been doing these seats for Tesla to that nice quality, indeed, is a gentleman who I met before he left Volvo to then help Tesla to get to better seats, who is now back home in Sweden, and we work together again. Now, it's, of course, something where certain attributes of the cars are just outstanding within the company because there is this. And some things comes natural. I mean, that's funny, but I have recognized working in different cultures. It's very clearly that, the seats being that comfy and great
Yeah.
It's not because, some kind of marketing fancy idea came, oh, that would be great to have. It's a very natural, almost national quality that this type of coziness, comfortness, that type of relaxed driving that it gives you is natural to Sweden and to people working now, of course, for Volvo. That's where we saw all of that gives it such a clear attribute to do something which is a bit more sporty, a bit more driver-oriented. Was exactly where there was a blank spot, which Volvo would and should never do, which then suited the new brand Polestar. So that's where we have, of course, a slight different angle and or orientation in the product attributes.
So what other major, because many companies have outsourced everything, steering wheels, instrument panels, seats, pretty much anything that customer, it used to be, if a customer touched it, that was profound knowledge, and we didn't want to give that away when I was first at Ford. Later on, it was, the fashion changed a bit and give everything away. And I'm just
comes
wondering,
and goes in cycles.
Yeah, it does. But where are you with Polestar? What are the major? I know we already talked about the seats. What else have you decided to keep in house?
The response to this question will be rather telling. Tesla is vertically integrating everything they possibly can. Most other automakers are doing the opposite. They don't have control of their own destiny. Given this, learning the most important things that Polestar themselves have decided to keep in-house will really tell us a lot about the mindset, the philosophy, and the overall strategy and goals of the company.
Well, the company is definitely standing on these three pillars: design, sustainability, and innovation. And when we talk about design, that's clearly that core that brings it all together. We have a very strong focus on making the sustainability, as we talked about, not just producing an electric car, bringing CO2 down. So we do a lot of work around CO2 reduction in our materials. We don't do that, of course, on our own, but that is where we add a lot, help young companies, young ideas to actually get into production. And that is the hard bit, which they mostly fail in. So for us to come and really bring then the process in, the knowledge of how you can take that great new idea and make a producible, in high frequency producible piece out of it. That is where we do a lot of our put energy and money into that.
So in short, Polestar's key focuses: make their cars look pretty, tick the right boxes in terms of CO2 emissions, aka make their cars greener, and innovation within a very small framework of things that they're actually doing themselves, innovating there, instead of innovating by doing the things that other people are doing for themselves better, like Tesla does. Now again, I'm not trying to be a dick here with Polestar, I'm just trying to illustrate the point here. Tesla still has no competition. Polestar is selling tens of thousands of their vehicles per year, but they're not even attempting to do what Tesla's doing. They're playing in a different segment of the market, and they intend to stay there. They're constraining their ambitions. They're not aiming for 10 plus million vehicles per year. They wouldn't even be aiming for 1 million vehicles per year. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you hear folks claim that the so-called competition is coming, or that Tesla is just a car company, maybe send them this video. This is approximately day 5,000 since the competition has been coming. Still yet to bust. Talk about edging. That was highly inappropriate, but on point. Now, if you're still here, and especially if you happen to be an engineering nerd who understands the value of optimizing, efficiency, and of course, vertical integration, taking matters into your own hands rather than outsourcing everything, I strongly encourage you to try Athletic Greens AG1. It's been more than 2 years since I began taking this stuff, and I've never felt better. Biggest effect of all, big boost in energy, also helps with my work capacity, my exercise capacity, recovery, and mood. And it's a great way to fill in nutritional gaps in your diet. Athletic Greens AG1 is packed full, and I mean packed full, of 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole food source nutrients. Plus, it has prebiotics and probiotics and digestive enzymes and adaptogens to help you deal with stress. This is why I've taken matters into my own hands. I'm not satisfied with average. Polestar might be. You might be. But like Tesla, no thanks. I'll do whatever it takes to optimize and integrate, and that includes taking matters of my health and vitality into my own hands. If you head to athleticgreens.com/SMR or click the link in the pinned comment, you will also get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 and K2 plus 5 travel packs. Speaking of taking my health and vitality into my own hands and being packed full of vitamins, minerals and whole food source nutrients, I ain't kidding guys, check this out. Got vitamin A, C, E, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, folate, vitamin B12, biotin, calcium, magnesium, selenium, zinc, copper, manganese. I could literally keep going on. Pause the video and have a look at this stuff if you're serious. As I've said recently, you will not get this through your diet. You'll get some stuff and you'll be okay. You'll exist. You'll be okay. Just like Polestar are going to be okay. Maybe. But if you want to take it to the Tesla level, hate to rain on your parade, but you're not going to get all this stuff through a balanced diet. It's physically impossible. You can't eat that volume of food. So what are you waiting for? Head to athleticgreens.com/SMR or click the link in the pinned comment. Start your daily health habit now and let me know how you're feeling in a few weeks' time. I've certainly been putting the extra energy to good use. I'm continuing to create exclusive content available only on Patreon. In addition, my daily YouTube videos and now also subscriber-only content over on Twitter. So check out the links in the pinned comment. I'll see you over on Patreon and or Twitter. Love ya.